So welcome everybody to the first meeting of the grandparents group. And what we're going to do today is first we're going to introduce ourselves around, and then we're going to hear from the esteemed Hillary Wilkinson, the host of the Healthy Screen Habits podcast. And afterwards have a discussion about what she talks about. And after that, whether or not she wants to stick around for this part, we're going to talk just a little bit about where we might be headed and what we want to do with ourselves and we want to keep meeting like this, etc. So without further ado, why don't we start introducing ourselves? I'll call on people sort of in order if I see them on the screen. Hillary, if you don't mind, we'll wait till last to hear from you. Okay, that's good. Okay, Mary Ellen, please.
Folks, I'm Mary Ellen McCormick, originally from Northern Virginia, from Vienna, Virginia, where Jen used to live. And we retired to Orlando about 3 years ago. I have two grandsons, Max and Petey. Petey turned 1 last week, and we celebrated that in Magic Kingdom. And Max started preschool today, the 3-year-old, just like your little guy did today. Did not do well, cried most of the time. My son Tommy and his wife called me after dropping him off and leaving him crying because my son works virtual, often only has to go into the office like once or twice a week, and his wife Yulita is home full time, so Max has been in his little cocoon of having his family around him. So preschool was quite the challenge. So it should have went till 1 o'clock, and at 11:45 they're like, time to pick up Max, you did a pretty good job. And then, of course, my son and his wife called right away. What do we do? I said, oh, we made it 2.5 hours. I said, tomorrow, or when he goes back on Friday, he'll make it 3 hours and then eventually 3.5. I said, I have 3 grown children. I said, you all went through the same thing. And it's part of life. Just be, calm with it and just remind him how much fun it is and just remind him you're there when you get back. But it's kind of that separation that they have the first time, right? So it's interesting, though, when your kids call you when they instantly need you to solve their problems with their children. So it's fun. Anyway, that's my quick story on Max going to preschool today and Petey turning 1 last week. So thanks for letting me share.
Lovely. Thank you. Meg, you're next.
Oh, okay. I am Meg Hackett. I've got, guess it depends on how you count them. I've gone from 0 to 6 grandkids in about 22 months because my son Patrick married a woman who brought 3 to their family, and they have since had 1. And then so Millie there is 7 months old. They're in Chicago, so I try and get over there as often as I can. I'm in Michigan. Then I have another one near me. Otto is 16 months, and I get to blessedly spend at least a couple days a week with him because I'm in the childcare lineup. So be still my heart. And then my other son is expecting in mid-October. So there we go. So the younger ones, I am particularly interested in this group to be just learning different strategies, because I think the challenges that they're going to face are considerable. But fortunately for me, my daughter and her partner are fully on board and already are no screening things. So that's awesome.
Thank you, Meg. Yeah, that's great. Terry, would you mind going ahead?
Absolutely. Hi, I'm Terry Corrigan, classmate of many of you. I live in Northwest Indiana. And this is particularly timely, Jenny, because we have 1 3-year-old granddaughter, almost 3.5, lives out in Denver and is now part of a divorced couple. Yeah, they've been divorced for about a year. The ex-husband, who is ex-Navy SEAL, has elected to not make this particularly an amicable co-parenting. So, and that's only germane in that I think our daughter feels a competitiveness because their agreement, he gets the daughter right now for 2 6-week periods. So it's the divorced dad syndrome. What's particularly germane is I just came back in early August from a week of babysitting said granddaughter. I was exhausted. She goes to daycare 4 days a week. So my task, and then she goes all day. So my task is getting her up, getting her dressed, getting her fed. We're still in the throes of potty training, getting her to school, and then in the evening. And so I've become acutely aware of how laptops and digital devices become really easy to give into when you just want, you need to win a battle. And it's not, this is a really happy child, but the id is pretty strong. And so why can't I have everything? And why can't I watch Peppa Pig or Scooby-Doo or whatever? And you're trying to instill these things. And at sometimes you're just like, we got to get on. We got to get on with this. And so, sure, you can have 10 minutes on this, so we can, eat your breakfast and we can get going. So.
Thank you. Your very honest assessments and quite thought-provoking. Jerry, go ahead.
Jerry Sincata. I live in Connecticut, and Perry, we have one grandchild, Perry, and so I'm well behind the curve with most of you. She's 10 and a half months old. She lives 10 minutes from us, which is tremendous. And like Meg said, my daughter and Scott, her husband, are very focused on no screens. In fact, whenever she's over here and the TV's on, it's like, what is that? You can just see her gravitate to see what it is. And so this is very interesting. I shared, Jenny, your book when I got back, and they said, oh yeah, we know some of this stuff, but we don't know all of this. And so, yeah, she's coming over, and I had no expectations about what having a grandchild would be like, and I'm having a ball. I have so much fun with her. And when she started daycare, it was 2 days that got taken away from me, and I was pissed. So she and now she's a Giants fan. She doesn't know it yet, but the kids are going. So she's coming. We're babysitting Friday night because they're going to a concert, and then they're going to the Giants game Saturday. So she's coming back, and I think she's going to get screen time with me Sunday to watch the game on Sunday. But I think the kids will be okay with that because it's a Giants. So I'm interested to hear about strategies and try and be a wise grandparent for my son, my daughter and son-in-law, and for Perry.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. I just want to make a note that my grandson, the only one I have, is 3.5, and he went to preschool today with both his parents. So Mary Ellen, we don't know what's going to happen Friday. I remember, I was on a FaceTime call with him yesterday, and I said, Chan, remember that article I shared with you about how you have to get him ready to get out of the car? And his eyes got really big. And she goes, oh, yes, he's good. They're going to come to the door and open the door. Started going like this with his head. I'm like, oh my gosh. But anyway, we kept talking. So we're trying to break him into the fact he is going to have to break away. But I think it's high time that we turn to Hillary to introduce herself and also to get hopefully right into your talk, especially since Jerry has to run. So thank you, Hillary, for coming. I'm so excited you're here. She's a very accomplished podcast host and has been doing your show for how many years now?
We started in March of 21. So yeah, over 100 episodes at this point and over 30,000 downloads. Has been in 6 continents. Apparently nobody listens to podcasts in Antarctica. Who knows, so, but yeah, thank you. So I am Hillary Wilkinson. I'm the podcast, the Healthy Screen Habits podcast, is actually a project of Healthy Screen Habits, which is a nonprofit organization. We're located in Southern California. There are 4 founding members, and we're still going strong. And I'm just listening to you guys, and I'm like holding on because you guys are living the dream right now. So many of you guys have your grandkids so close to you, and that's so exciting. I'm not there yet. I have a 17 and a 21-year-old. So we're a ways out yet, but Early childhood development has always been my jam. I'm an educator by training. And so, but yeah, the whole healthy screen habits gig has kind of, life takes circuitous routes. And now it's one of my main passions in life. And that's how Jennifer Joy and I got connected. And I think that your group is amazing because grandparents hold such a powerful influence upon families. And in fact, we at Healthy Screen Habits think that grandparents have such an integral or hold such an integral part of family life. One of our 5 core habits is the grandma rule. And I'll go over that in a bit. But I'm going to go ahead and start screen sharing then. So tonight I'm briefly going to cover some of the sort of the generational differences in the digital age and go over some facts about big tech and brain development that you guys actually may already know. But as with anything, sometimes it's good to, you may know something, but then it hits different when you're at different stages in life. So it may be something that you're thinking, yeah, I already know that, but there may be some things that you learn. And lastly, I'll go over some strategies that you can use to empower your family with their own healthiest screen habits. And here we go with the old classic, Dennis the Menace. And first thing right off the bat, always with grandparent groups that I like to address is the generation gap, which is certainly not new to this age of technology. I mean, every 20-year cycle of humanity seems to get its own struggle handed to them. And this makes our current time not unique. But that being said, digital technology has kind of contributed to the human condition in ways not seen before, and it's created a struggle with connection. And it's kind of nice to know where our commonalities and where our differences lay. So we are all digital citizens, but where we are in our comfortability of online life can kind of be tracked by our age or like I just said, generational divides. Digital natives are going to be those millennials and Gen Z populations. And the digital natives have this kind of intuitive navigation ability of technology. They have a fluency to their movements online and understanding of devices. And they have often had smartphone access since childhood or early teen years. They view owning devices and having access to the internet as a right, and they see it as critical to productive life as any other major utility, which makes digital immigrants, the Gen Xers, baby boomers, and older, we often remember the family computer or getting the first desktop. And we're very aware of the cost of these devices that we carry around, as well as we are really baffled by the processing ability of the devices we carry in our pocket having more capability than all of NASA's computers that put a man on the moon. So we tend to view technology as a privilege and a luxury. And also interesting to note about the 2 different citizen pockets, if you will, is there's kind of like a difference in the way that thought processes and problem solving is handled. And the easiest way to do this is to do sort of a comparison. The digital natives, those Gen Zers and millennials, they like to parallel process and multitask. And they often have multiple screens open at once, like they're watching TV while they're texting, while they're doing something on a laptop. And they report feeling most alive when they're navigating a couple of platforms at the same time. They typically rely heavily on technology, and they will choose it as a source of expertise over prior experiences. For an example, they trust the car's navigation system over a known prior route. Okay, digital immigrants we are more prone to second guess technology. We'll like, well, the nav system says to take that route, but I know this is the quicker way. And so we also prefer to focus on one thing at a time rather than multitask. In fact, many Gen Zers and older are very skeptical of multitasking, and we often find multiple screen usage to be uncomfortable and kind of distracting. Digital natives tend to make decisions very quickly, even ones that we think of as like real big deal ones, like where to live, what to major in, job transfers. They're big fans of a pivot, and change is really exciting. Digital immigrants prefer to take time to think and consider, weigh options when making decisions. And change is something to be approached like with just a lot of forethought. Then for the last comparison, natives update devices without concern or hesitation. In fact, they typically have their devices update automatically. Digital immigrants often approach device updates with mild dread because your whole desktop gets shifted around, or like the whole operating system, I'm convinced I lose photos every time there's an update. And sometimes like we'll put off updating for ridiculous long periods of time. But honestly, we often remember the days of computer crashes happening with updates, like the little cherry bomb icon on our Apple IIes. So the big thing to remember here is that each set of digital citizens brings important things to the table, and we can learn from each other. A lot of what gets focused on is when kids of whom I'm assuming are your kids' age, I'm thinking millennials, there's a whole lot of focus on this. We're the first generation to be navigating these parenting waters. We're the first. But I do a lot of presentations like mothers of preschoolers and stuff like that. And the thing that I really like to point out to them is, yes, you are the first generation to be doing that, but you are the last to remember the before. And all of a sudden it puts them in a place of power where they're like, oh yeah. And so it's like, and recall all of those things, So part of learning from each other with this digital citizenship comes from sharing what we know. And so much of what we hear and read about our kids and technology is really scary and overwhelming. We hear about rates of cyber harms and gaming addictions and trafficking and mental health. It just goes on. And a lot of this is all crisis messaging, which is hard. Crisis messaging leads to crisis fatigue, which quickly turns to apathy, which is where it's like, oh, I can't even handle it. Just give them the device. It doesn't matter. So the goal is to avoid this apathy and crisis fatigue by getting empowered through education. I firmly believe education saves lives because it gives us the power and the opportunity to make informed choices. And when we gather awareness and information, it kind of sparks that desire to become educated on a topic, which we can then gain empowerment to make our own choices. So following that tech-savvy pathway, we first need to go over some facts, establish a common language, and then lastly, I'm going to dive into strategies that you can use to help keep grandkids safe at your house and help your whole family establish healthy screen habits. It sounds like a lot of your kids are already on board though, which is awesome. So the first fact is kind of a mental shift, and that's recognizing that the internet is not a thing. The internet is a place. And at Healthy Screen Habits, every season, we hear from very distressed families who have been at the homes of relatives who had no idea about the content that was getting accessed when the kids were together in the basement or in the other room. And so when you allow kids unrestricted internet access, I live in, like I said, I live outside of LA. So my reference is an LA reference, but it's the equivalent of dropping them off alone late at night on the corner of Hollywood and Vine, which if you've ever been to Hollywood, you know, that is no place anyone really probably wants to be late at night by themselves. The difference being is that the internet is like that 24 hours a day. So we would never do in real life what we do all the time in the virtual world when we hand kids an unprotected device. So when your child or grandchild is on an iPad, Chromebook, tablet, whatever the device is, it needs at the very minimum to have parent filters in place. And you can easily figure out how to do this by simply Googling the device you have, followed by the words parent controls. And that's the very minimum that should be in place. It's like locking your front door. It won't stop every intruder, but it offers that first layer of protection. So that whole concept of just remember the internet is a place. The next fact to know about is that technology is great. I mean, we at Healthy Screen Habits are not anti-tech. We are pro intentional use of tech. And one of the wonderful things that has done is allow us to see the inner workings of the brain. And as you probably know by now, the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for the executive functioning and decision-making part of our brain, is not fully developed until around age 25. So if you can remember raising your teenagers, and they did something, I'm trying to remind myself of this all the time. They do something that you don't understand and you say, why did you do that? And the response is, I don't know. I have to recognize that's a valid response because it's actually the truth sometimes. So this is important in relation to healthy screen habits because kids have not yet developed the parts to determine limits around screen use on your own, which puts the onus on us. So we have to establish time limits, co-regulate big feelings with them, and then ultimately they learn to regulate themselves and moderate their own use of screens. With a lot of, this is older than your crew, but you know, so much of what we look at with healthy screen habits is not actually in the phases of the very little kids. It's parent modeling behavior that needs to be looked at. And sometimes it can just help to make others aware of things like this, that social media runs off an economic model called the attention economy. And when Facebook was first being developed, the objective was, how do we consume as much of your time as possible? And this was the mindset that led to the creation of features like the like button that biohacked users by giving them a little dopamine hit to encourage them to upload more content. And it's essentially a social validation feedback loop that exploits a vulnerability in human psychology. These are not my words. This was said by Sean Parker, who's the founding president of Facebook. They knew what they were doing. So it's up to us to regulate what's happening. And this plus the biohacking of neurotransmitters is what makes TikTok, Snapchat, and all those other platforms so compelling. The programmers were in partnership with neuroscientists and figured out how to create platforms to kickstart kind of this dopamine production and other neurotransmitters to keep people engaged. And this is why we can't put down our devices. So the attention economy, like, what does that mean? Your attention equals more time, which equals more money for the platform. So tech developers figured out early on a really great secret, which was surprise and outrage equals attention. And in the attention economy, this is key, and they're always looking to make money. So I bring this up because during this election time, it's really important to remember. And it might be a good time to mute certain accounts. Not just news feeds, but family members who don't share political views. Your relationship with your kids and your grandchildren will be a lasting legacy. Don't let big tech own it by making you a puppet in their attention economy. To determine the role you and your kids want tech to have in the family setting, you need to talk about it. And talking about tech can be really tricky. And some parents can feel really defensive when they think their parenting style or their choices are being critiqued. And it helps to have a common language. And this list kind of gives you some of the current terms to use. Like the first one, online versus offline life. So now back when, way back when, we used to talk about things being IRL or in real life, but this is one of those generational things. Many young parents today may have had a phone or social media from the age of middle school forward. Most of their social life has played out online, and there's no longer a defining point of real for online versus offline interactions. It's all real. And when we use language that discounts someone's reality by listing things to be real life, it implies that the other stuff is not real, and therefore it kind of drives a wedge in that generation gap. And to kind of convince you how real online life can be, go and check your bank account balance online. And if you see that your online bank account has been zeroed out, it is going to trigger a very real offline reaction in yourself. So just recognize offline life, it's all the same. And when we talk about things, with using those words, it respects the value of all of these transactions. So the next one, if you've read Jennifer Joy's recent Durable Human newsletter, she talked a lot about this phone-based versus play-based childhood. And Jonathan Haidt made really big news this summer with the publication of his book, The Anxious Generation. It's a very good read. And it brought into common culture the concept of this phone-based childhood versus a play-based childhood. And the labels are pretty self-explanatory. The book goes into great detail and provides a lot of really compelling data to support what many grandparents are already shouting, which is kids should be offline and outside as much as possible. And all of that to say, approaching your kids with questions about these topics and using these words will kind of underline your relevance in today's parenting concerns. If you're using like, oh, well, I see we're using play-based childhood, just speak the language of the people that you're trying to talk more with. So when your grandkids are at your house, asking your children for a list of approved apps, shows, and games will save you a lot of heartache. It would be wonderful if all of your time with your grandchildren involved no screens, but that won't always be the case. And you can use the opportunity to talk about shows and what you've learned about young children's brain development when you ask for the approved lists. And because you are asking specifically, it implies a level of respect for their role and their expertise in this digital world. It has been shown time and again that those whom have lasting impact upon us are these people who we feel most connected to. So secure attachment, which is secure connection to a caregiver, turns to be one of the greatest indicators of lifelong things like durability and the capacity to form healthy relationships and many other things. And it's really easy when our kids are, or when your grandkids are 10 months old, because you just get to pick them up and gaze at them and talk to them. But then when they get older, it gets trickier and it gets harder. So the way to connect is everyone likes to be an expert. about something. And one of the easiest ways to create connection with adult kids is to really lean into this by asking them non-judgmental, non-transactional questions about their online life. So questions like, do you have any shows you're streaming? Or I'm looking for social media accounts that focus on Mediterranean diet recipes. Do you have any recommendations? Really putting them kind of like in the seat of the expert, or where do you find the best travel deals? Or one thing that I've been interested in finding out is how many people are using ChatGPT at work for anything. So it's just kind of interesting to get this feedback. And for grandkids, depending on the age, you can ask about their favorite shows or video games, depending on how old they are, and like in the shows, who's their favorite character, So tech, when we use it as a tool, as a connector, you can think about it as bridging between online and offline interests. And that kind of keeps tech in its lane, which is where we want it to stay. Let's see, next, so now we're moving into strategies as well. And when we talk about strategies for digital protection, it's like many other models, we talk about the use of layers like Swiss cheese. You have one slice of Swiss cheese and you can see right through the holes. But if you take another slice and lay it on top of the holes, then you get a little more coverage. You layer enough slices of cheese and ultimately the holes should be dramatically reduced or even covered. So if we go through the slices of cheese here, making a sandwich, the first slice of cheese would be parental controls. And these should be in place on every device that kids have access to. So you can use YouTube to get tutorials on any device to help you turn on parent controls. And then the next thing also I recommend is turning off autoplay. So for somebody who's having a hard time getting off of the Peppa Pig or getting off of the Miss Lori or whatever, you can turn off autoplay on all streaming platforms to kind of gain control back. For whole house protection, you may want to install a router, which will filter content coming into your home. I'll explain a little bit more of that in the next slide. And then lastly, if your family can establish some type of digital plan. So the picture shown here is a copy of our free downloadable tool called the Family Tech Plan. It was developed to serve as a conversational springboard for families to decide the role that they wanted tech to play in their lives. It's totally customizable and it's meant to be revisited as the kids grow up. So I'll give a link to that at the end of this presentation. So a lot of people, this is getting back to that router coverage that I was talking about. And a lot of people are just looking to kind of staunch the flow of internet sewage coming into their home. And the best way to do this is through mesh Wi-Fi coverage. So you can install a router in your house that allows you to control the content that flows to devices in your home. And this is what is the best at preventing those accidental encounters with bad / disturbing / pornographic content that we're talking about, where that happens during the holidays, and it always happens during the holidays. So the thing to note is that routers only cover the devices in your home. Once the device leaves your home, the router will not cover them, which is why if you have a designated, say, iPad or something and then that your grandchild uses and you think, oh, it's covered, it's really important to still have those parental control filters in place. Because if they take it with them anywhere outside of that router coverage, that will no longer be filtered. So at Healthy Screen Habits, we recommend the Griffin router, and it's spelled right down there at the bottom. If you go to our website, you can find out more, plus get it in an affiliate link, which saves you some money. And full disclosure, a small kickback to our nonprofit. So here's a bigger picture, plus a QR code of our family tech plan, which is that free downloadable tool on our website. And as many families as there are online right now, there will be as many different solutions to creating your own family healthiest tech plan, because every family has unique needs. I mean, even just as you guys were going around talking about it, we have one family that's dealing with a divorce. We've got another family who's dealing with, a parent who's working away. We've got another. So every family has unique needs and wants around screen and tech. And so this tool is designed to be, like I said, that springboard for the conversation surrounding technology to help your family build their philosophy about the role that you want or that they want tech to play in their life. And it fosters open discussion between all family members and hits on key areas like doing an inventory of the devices in your home, creating tech-free times and spaces, like really protecting dinner time as a tech-free time. And so it's a good place to start. Also on our website are 5 core healthy screen habits. And because I told you earlier about the importance that we place on grandparents, in one of those rules, I want to show it to you. I'm going to see if it'll queue up here. We have 5 videos. There we go. So you can see the videos are real short. We've got 5 core habits, and then you can use those for discussion as well. So Jennifer Joy mentioned earlier the Healthy Screen Habits podcast. Thank you so much. And the vision behind the podcast was kind of a whole library just filled with resources and research and stories about anything that you could need or want to know about screen habits or raising kids in this digital age, advocacy, how it's changing relationships. And that was, like I said, that was the vision behind the podcast. So I'm the host. It's 30 minutes and it drops on Wednesdays. You get a healthy screen habit, which is a tip or takeaway to try out in your home with every episode. And if you're interested in topics like this group might be interested in specific topics, like I did a whole season on tech, tots, and littles, which highlights kind of the kindergarten and under crowd and resources like screen-free summer camps and stuff like that, how to get kids outside in nature. And you can find those episodes by topic on our website. And here are all the places you can find us. But the best place to start is healthyscreenhabits.org. And I can't thank you enough for staying up. You guys are like at various hours all over the country. So I know it's pretty, I don't know, it'll be past my bedtime. So I appreciate you hanging in there. And do you want to open it up for chatting, Jennifer?
Yes, I do. Do you want to stop screen sharing and then
Oh, that would be better, huh?
hopefully people got
There we
those
go.
details. So let's just throw it out to the audience. Are there questions for Hillary or comments?
Hi, Hillary. I'm Karan Martinez. I joined late. I apologize for that. So rude, but I was happy to catch the last 15, 20 minutes. I'm an educator at the college level up here in Washington, D.C. And, started off the semester and lots of cell phone policies and keeping our students. I mainly teach at both ends of the spectrum, so first year students and then MBAs. And so part of the problem that I'm finding is we use our phones for so many things.
Mm-hmm.
I'll ask students, put your gadget or whatever. It's not laptops anymore. It's, well, I'm taking notes on my phone. I'm taking screenshots of the slides. I'm actually looking up the reference you just said. And so the dependency is becoming, even so much more widespread than just kind of entertainment related. That's just an observation. I'm a new grandparent. I just have a 2.5-year-old that Jenny knows. Our sons have been friends since middle school. And my question is, any tips, and I probably missed that, just about being very mindful of staying in my lane while phrasing things correctly with my son and my daughter-in-law. They're both pretty much on their phones. Now I find the TV is on still a lot of the time when Miles is home and not in daycare. They both work. But it's usually on music with shapes kind of going. I still don't love it, but I'm wondering, is even that level of a device and a thing, he goes and makes tacos in his taco stand, and he plays blocks, and he runs and gets things, and he doesn't sit there like just transfixed, but it's just kind of present. Any thoughts about those harms and maybe ways to bring it up?
Yeah. Well, I think you're on the right track to be very sensitive in your approach. And yeah, one of the things I talked about was the use of language around like online versus offline life, rather instead of using the phrase in real life, which kind of just is kind of triggering, it seems, for a lot of younger, the younger parents. And I, I have big thoughts about background TV going, as I know Jennifer does. I feel like you're probably the better person to talk about that as far as.
Well, what we could just cut to the quick that it's not recommended to have the wall TV on all the time, and that it distracts them from their play, and it reduces words and speaking in the environment, which in turn causes the child to not hear as many words and not speak maybe as soon as some other kid, or just hear a lot of words, which is what they're supposed to ideally hear. So Karan's question would be, is it possible to bring that up with her kids? Is there a way to tactfully say that? And I wonder about data, about whether, to have some research or something to point to is helpful or hurts.
Yeah, so because I'm the podcast host, I always refer back to episodes that I've done. Okay. And I would refer you specifically to, there are some speech therapists that I've talked to on in that Tech Tots and Littles drop down menu for, they've got a lot of information about language development and how tech can interfere with it, and the rise in speech referrals that kindergarten teachers are seeing for sure, as well as Dr. John Hutton does I did a great episode with him. He's one of the guys that was the first on the line about looking into the actual pathways that get established in the brain with white matter from different centers in the brain to language learning. So assigning language to.
Hillary, he's actually very, very chatty and very social. So I don't worry about that aspect. What I've started noticing is he doesn't have much tolerance for being bored.
Oh, sure.
It's more the distraction factor. It's sort of more, if the TV's off, he's kind of looking around like something's missing, or I heard him for the first time the last couple of weeks say, "Grammy, can you turn the TV on?" And then so that it's more just like how he reaches for it, how I see my students reach for their phones.
Mm-hmm,
Social,
mm-hmm.
he's engaging. I don't worry about speech patterns and things like that. His parents
Yeah.
do a great job of talking to him, singing to him, all that stuff. I just have this pervasive gadget that I see in their living room, and they're saying, well, it's just music, it's just shapes, it's not a show. He's not sitting there watching. And I don't know if there's research
Yeah.
around that, just the fact that it's in the background.
Yeah, but that constant need for overstimulation
Yeah,
is absolutely something like good for you for picking up on it.
it's more that.
One of the hats that I wear is a substitute teacher. Okay. And that's where I get to go and see this and, see these play out in real life. And I can tell you, I see kids who are they are so uncomfortable with a lack of stimulation. It comes out as ADHD type behaviors where they're tapping, they're bugging, they're spinning, they're doing stuff to provide that stimulation just because they don't know how to settle down. And I don't know Jennifer, do you know of any studies that would speak to that specifically? Like ADD type behavior? I mean, this is what I have seen. And then because I go around and do my little anecdotal collection, I'll say, oh, so what do you like to do at home? And that's when I find out like, oh, okay, yep. Like, and mostly it confirms what you suspect.
Yeah. Well, I think again, it's what Karan is wondering. Karan, are you wondering how to approach the idea of turning the TV off for a while when you're there?
If I'm babysitting and they're leaving me for a while, I always have them turn the TV off
Mm-hmm.
because we're either outside or we're just playing. So they know that. It's
Yeah.
more kind of raising their awareness about it as a constant. And they're open. I mean, they already have made pivots and things, and there's a lot of information that they enjoy knowing.
Yeah. Yeah. So I wonder if that's like one of those areas where you just look to establish like tech-free times in the day.
Mhm.
If you can talk about, oh, I talked to this lady in California and you can send them to our website. And that's one of our 5 core habits, as well as it's on the family tech plan is establishing tech-free times and spaces.
Mhm.
And so I think that's where you start. I don't think it's going to be one thing that all of a sudden they're just going to turn on. You know what I mean? But if you can build in pockets, or another thing that other people have tried once they try that, and if they see, a peaceful time building around that. But I think what you need to maybe preface it by saying is, are you familiar with something they call it the sunset effect in child development, where it's like, yeah, it's gonna get crazy before it gets better.
Mhm.
So, I mean, just anticipate a sunset effect of him going nuts
Mhm.
before he'll settle down. And I really think that they'll probably see a longer, I think the benefit for them is they will see a longer time of engagement of independent play
Mhm.
without the distraction, because what it's doing is it is actually interrupting his play.
Yeah, that's what it seems like to me. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Okay, anybody else have observations, thoughts?
No, I will just jump in and say this was helpful. I'm walking away feeling, at least right now, better about that. I mean, with a 3-year-old, again, she goes to daycare 4 days a week, and it's outside play. It's a ton of socialization, which the little girl needs, but there's no screens involved in that. So a lot of this feels really good in terms of still being able to get ahead of things.
Mhm.
The one thing that is unique to this, unfortunately, is this divorce. And my daughter's inability to probably create rules that the ex-husband may follow or may not follow. And right now they've been divorced for about a year. He's so committed to being difficult and adversarial that, and we just don't know. The times, again, they're in, month, 6 week periods because they don't live, he's in Michigan, she's in Denver. We don't know what goes on for those 6 weeks. And he's fully not going to share just because he doesn't have to. It's really, my wife calls him the toddler, because he's more infantile than the granddaughter is. But so, I mean, that's the one ongoing thing for this, that even as I listened and took notes, she's not yet addicted to screen time. She knows her cartoon, her Disney cartoon, streaming when she gets to do it, and she knows her shows. But relatively speaking, she mixes in an awful lot of playtime. She loves to read or begin to learn to read or be read to. So I'm kind of walking away guardedly optimistic that this is a nice sensitivity to begin to be aware of right now. Even if I don't think it's a super problem.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I think there's a big win already in that it sounds like her daycare setting is a screen-free setting. So, I mean,
and she's there 8 to 5, literally.
Yeah, because certainly there are other daycares and preschool settings that have opted not to be screen-free, and it's pretty challenging.
I just wanted to point out that reading is being shown in the research to be more and more powerful for so many things involved in either your relationship, the child's brain development, the kid's language ability, that kind of thing. So having books around the house that you can pull out that are really interesting, go into the library, being excited about what you bring home, that kind of thing can be a really nice distraction, because she doesn't know anything other. You're going to help her expand her interests by having books around. I know you're tired and it's exhausting, so that's asking a little bit more. But maybe some of these books could be so beautiful that she would sit there and she'd be, happy to read them.
I would say, Jenny, that's kind of fun. I've found it because, she'll pop up on the couch or the bed, and we always read before bedtime, with her. And she would go and pick out a book. She has quite the library. And that's really was nice bonding time.
Yeah. And I wonder if even some of those books can travel with her back and forth to Dad's house.
We do. Yeah. I don't know about that. I only say that because we've had experience where if things go in, they don't come back.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
maybe not library books.
well, and I don't know. We don't know that he's. I don't think anyone thinks he's a bad father. I get asked that question a lot. We just don't know, what his rules are. And I would think it'd be fairly predictable that if one said, here are the rules that we have laid down for little Sloan, he would push back just out of principle.
Well,
So there may not be, I may be articulating a problem that really doesn't exist, because I don't think he would necessarily be any worse on this.
Yeah, but I think it's okay to open the conversation, but it sounds like he would be not necessarily open to having the conversation is the challenge.
He he might do it. He would just shut it down and tell you,
Yeah.
none of your business.
Hmm. Well, this sort of leads us into what we might look at in a future meeting, which would be, it's a bit of a societal problem because society doesn't quite understand how delicate brain development is in the 0 to 5 age range. And they think that Peppa Pig watching it for 3 or 4 hours is nothing. And it's important that society get a little smarter because, of course, if a kid is stuck in a 2-dimensional environment like this, they can't, their brains are just not going to be as experienced as other kids, and they're going to be limited. And we don't understand that yet. And it could be something that we talk about is why does the American Academy of Pediatrics have certain guidelines for ages and, just kind of the reasoning behind it, and perhaps getting into some of the basic research about what's been found in the last 5 years surrounding just unbridled, pretty much, watching, because it is, another thing you learn is that it is, the content itself is made to be sticky and addictive. So I see that we're after the 1 hour time. And I'm wondering if we could, first of all, thank Hillary for being with us and really being so eye-opening for me with so many of your important tips. And I'm not going to use the term in real life again. Goodbye. I've done that a lot. So thank you for enlightening me. And now, do you want to stick around for our talking about where we're going with this, or do you want to sign off?
The lasagna just came out of the oven. So my 17-year-old just pulled in, and it was lovely spending time with you all. I really hope you go and check out our website and check out the podcast, and I'm happy to come and chat again. Okay.
Thanks, Hillary.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye
Thank
now.
you.
So much.
Thanks.
Bye. So first of all, do we think that would you like to have another discussion together with or without someone to facilitate? Do you want to go around really quickly and see, what you think are some advantages, or, what your thoughts are? Meg?
Yeah, I would like to keep talking about it. I think the strategies are really helpful. I appreciated Ron's question about the music in the background, because with the screen having the music, because like I said, my daughter and her partner are really attentive to things, but that's how they were doing music for a little while. And I kind of came in and she looked at me and she was like, "It's just music." And I said, "We can get a little speaker." And I've noticed they just turned it off. So that's great. And then he comes to my house, a couple days a week. So not an issue. No screens around here.
And Terry?
Yeah, what I like, and with the broader group that, is not around, for me, it's very valuable to hear about the kids at different age levels. I'm still feeling like we're early enough that hearing people's experiences with 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 8-year-old, 10-year-old, we don't have that. I mean, case in point, the one topic about monitoring their online use isn't an issue yet.
Right.
But I suspect it will be faster than I think it, and I'm prepared for it. And so to me, I'm enjoying the group input. To me, it's valuable because I'm hearing different angles in.
Okay. Karan, do you have a thought? I know everybody's busy. You are extremely busy since you are not still going in full time as the head of the Kogai Business School of American University's Business Communications Program.
Oh, wow.
Yes, it's a mouthful. Yes, it is. I am busy. I also love learning as a Gram, and I don't know if I could be a regular member, but I sure love knowing when these topics are happening and how I contribute for sure. And yeah, I mean, I do look ahead, and right now, a lot of our work right now is about teaching appropriate use of artificial technology, artificial intelligence tools
Yeah.
for college students. And it's just another precise version of what we're talking about, right? Of using your own creative brain. I just wrote some teaching notes for a workshop I'm giving next week. And the sentence, you are not allowed to use artificial intelligence tools. Rather, we want to privilege the creative process coming out of your own minds. So, but at the same time, it's a world that's going to be filled with artificial technology tools, and the expectation as workers that students, that young people know how to use these to supplement their productivity and things at work. So it's finding that balance. At any rate, big picture, this is always a very compelling topic to think about, how we interface with technology writ large. And whether it's with a 2.5-year-old or an 8-year-old or 21-year-old, and kind of how we talk to our grown kids in their 30s about it, it's a compelling issue for all of us to think about. So I appreciate being invited to the table.
You know, the other thing that occurred to me, Jenny, as Karan was talking, was over time, how fast all this is changing to begin with. You know, I mean, platforms, devices that we're having to address now, the TikToks, in 2 years, I don't know, 6 months, whatever, it could be really different. And you know, I just read an article about, you know, the Apple CEO, and I mean, what they're thinking up just kind of blows your mind, right? That, and in a fairly frightening way, that isn't necessarily great for societal, you know, long-term implications, but it's cool, you know,
Right.
this whole notion of augmented reality, and suddenly augmented reality becomes much more interesting than real life, you know. And so this is only going to get trickier, I guess. I feel like.
Well, and when you go to schools and iPads are part
Yeah.
of the curriculum. I mean, my daughter and I were talking about that. She goes, if there's all these studies, and she wasn't questioning it, she's doing the research also. She goes, there's all these studies out there to talk about how this is not a good thing, and here they are, and they're getting iPads. And I said, well, I mean, part of it is it seemed like a good thing 5 years ago, and then, or however many years ago, and then by the time the grant funding scheme, you know, streams catch up with things, you now have money in technology pots going into schools that they want to expense on their students and curriculum. And now it's in conflict with what we're learning in terms of brain development and what might be healthiest. So I just think I'm agreeing with all of the observations that this is just going to be an evolving topic with lots of things that as grandparents we're going to
You know,
need.
Meg, that's really an interesting topic. And Karan, I think you probably confront this all the time, but you know, I came into this thinking just about the seduction of the online entertainment options, and not necessarily the immersion of screens into everything you do. You know, I'm a 1.5 years retired, and I was working for an ad agency for many, many years. And the older I got, the more infuriated I got when you'd have a meeting and everybody brought their laptop. And you were 100% convinced they weren't necessarily paying attention to what your meeting was about, because they're on it and they're like, well, I'm taking notes. Well, maybe you were, maybe you weren't. You know, you don't run around the table and do a fast audit, but you think about that in the school. environment? And what happens when, laptops just aren't what you bring in anymore? You're bringing in Oculus or headphones or something. And people wonder about attention spans anymore.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I'm probably getting off point here. Jenny, sorry.
No, no.
But Meg, I will say just quickly, and I've told Jenny this story. One of my goddaughters is a school psychologist in San Diego Unified Schools, and she reports a high level of frustration with the teachers in her K through 6 that all the kids have iPads, and the teachers just say, I just feel like I'm the tech help. I'm not
Yeah.
teaching anymore. I have a blank screen. I can't hear. Because the curriculum is hand out the iPads and have them do exercise on. She was like, what am I there for?
Yeah.
High level of teacher frustration. We don't go into teaching to watch kids be on screens, to press buttons and do a quiz. It's very frustrating all around.
Yeah.
You all are intellectually curious about many things. So we happen to have toddlers in our lives right now, but there's nothing to say that we can't have a get together like this to talk about the current state of thinking about technology in the classroom, which is now finding out that a lot of the tech that is used in the classroom is not only distracting, but ineffective, and was designed to be engaging and not effective in the first place. So there are actually people out there training folks like us and our children to go into the school, ask them why they have why they're using certain software, and even asking or opting out of having their kids use a tablet during class or a Chromebook or something like that. There's a whole world of that side of things, and we certainly could talk about that at some point. So I guess that doesn't help because it does broaden our horizon a little bit, but that's easy. I mean, I can get either myself, or I think I could probably get somebody in this group that I'm in called the Screens in Schools group that could give a short presentation on technology in the classroom and how so much research from around the world is showing it's not really living up to the hype that happened during COVID when teachers were getting direct calls from tech companies to get them to adopt this stuff in their classroom. And everybody.
I like the aspect of that, Jen, that you said that sounds like we can actually do something to affect change. The advocacy part of it, I don't have a lot of time, but I'd love to write a few letters to just say I'm concerned, and as a new grandparent and my child's going into this, my grandchild, what can change? What's possible? What can be re-examined? That's a hopeful thing to think about, that our thoughts about it, our worries about it could turn into some kind of action. I'm glad people are starting to look at that.
Yeah, there are more and more resources that actually are scripts you can use, and how to set up a meeting and the whole thing. And in these books, both of these books, which I have here, this guy, Jonathan Haidt, has it on his website, just resources and scripts. She has resources and scripts, which is the Opt-Out Family. See, I have my little. So that's a thing. So anyway, what about our next meeting? I had a note here before we started, kind of we just looked at communicating and terminology between our kids and ourselves. Who are we? I don't know if it's worth having. At the Notre Dame Writers Panel, I was talking about how we're the last generation BC. Hillary kind of referred to it in her talk. She was telling the millennials that they remember before. And so there's a question about whether we should explore what we've got and how we can communicate or how we can act as leaders with kids. So that's one place we can go. And what is the state of childhood also is, mental health issues in the teens, use of kind of the unthinking use of iPads and stuff for toddlers. New research coming out about how it leads to anger management issues with them and other things. Anybody have a gut feeling about when we would have another meeting and if we should have a topic.
I'm gonna actually leave that to you all. And I do have a lesson plan I have to review for tomorrow, so I'm so sorry. But Meg, Terry, it was just nice meeting you. Jen,
Nice meeting you also.
meeting you as well.
always great to see. Love to plug in, would love to share what I'm seeing from my view and actually do something, some advocating too.
Okay,
So,
cool. Thanks,
I'm gonna
Carl.
leave. See
I'll
ya.
be in touch.
Bye.
Okay. So we could talk about, we could get together in 6 weeks or a month or something like that. How often would you feel like you wanted to make some time to do something like this? Mary and Meg. Okay, go ahead.
Well, one thought, I know when I've had book clubs that have tried to meet monthly, it seems like we were always bumping into something. We were more successful when we met every 6 weeks, it just seemed to work out better. So I don't know if people want to do it more frequently. I certainly would make the effort to do that, but I've just, in my experience, that was a good frequency.
That's what I was going to throw out as well, Meg. I would say, 6 to 8 weeks, every couple of months, every other month kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
That feels like it gives you enough time to breathe over either things you've talked about, things you might be able to witness in your own life.
Implement
interesting
some of
to
the
say that.
strategies, implement and report back.
Yeah, to do that. I mean, and when Terry, it's interesting even to talk amongst ourselves about how's it going,
Yeah.
say how's it going? Did you, any new, any progress, any changes, that sort of thing. So, okay, so let's say every other month. And I suppose we could round up somebody to do presentation, but we don't have to do that necessarily. We could also have sort of a reading thing that we do, that we read together, like an article or something like that I could throw out there. What, in terms of the next time, a bit of a theme, you two are here, so you're sort of it. And should we talk about ourselves as a generation? Should we talk about the state of children? What else do you think we should talk about next?
Our generation's experience, I think, could be an interesting thing to talk about, just to be able to put it into words, what is different. And I know, I was super tech averse from the get-go. I remember, I get my law firm when they were saying, oh, and this is going to give us all so much time. And I'm like, you fools, we will have no time. It will take over everything. But we didn't have it. And yet it became very consuming, I'm assuming, in all of our lives, technology, and just trying to put different, guardrails and things in place. So I think thinking about how to, what was that experience, being able to articulate it, I'd really have to think about that. What were some of those differences, and then, how you can tap into some of that, and be sensitive to the fact that our kids are under a lot of pressure. Like I'm reading this, I think this book that you recommended, Jenny, this Opt-Out Family, I think this is fantastic. And at the same time, I read it and think, you have a lot of time and energy and money, and these young people are not in the same position as you. I'm thinking of the author, as she would just describe different scenarios. I'm like, wow, this assumes a lot of privilege that not a lot of young people necessarily have. And so how to translate that into something that is accessible to a broader group of young people.
I was thinking, Terry, that maybe I could communicate back with some of our classmates who were at the panel and that actually signed up for my newsletter, and invite them next time, because they were pretty excited about, how unusual we are, or how unprecedented we are as a generation. And, we should be proud of that. And it's different from what Meg's talking about. So maybe we have to look at two sides of it, which is like, we are also contending with the digital world, and it's changed us. but we have the perspective of knowing what it was like in the before times, as they're sometimes called. And therefore, we're not afraid to go out in the woods. We're not afraid to go to the park, go for a walk. You know, we're not afraid to whistle and sing and do stuff like that out of our own head, our own experience. And maybe we have the patience to sit there with the kids and to listen to them. And so that's what we can bring to the next generation. So
I like that. It's funny. I was always thinking I was gonna reach out tomorrow, at least to Jerry Perez and Barb, and tell them about tonight and how much I've enjoyed this. I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around a specificity of a topic. One thing I'm intrigued about that I was listening to people and I've seen anecdotally before even this was how parents, grandparents, us, how we talk to collaborate, if you will, with your children about their kids, about the grandchildren. This overarching, what is grandma and grandpa's role? What is overstepping? What is not? We're in an interesting place in that with what our daughter's gone through, she's very close to her mother and she reaches out all the time to us on a variety of topics, but it's quite often it's been for insight and a shoulder. But other people aren't necessarily in that same place. And I can't remember who was talking maybe about their children's homes being a no screen home, like to a militaristic level, and which has raised, like I think he's got his second wife, her kids, so his stepchildren are like that. And I've watched the mother, Mark's wife, really butt heads with her daughter about this topic, and by no means are Mark and Pam freewheeling. It's just, the mom, the daughter, is really dug in. And you're like, okay, well, how do we all navigate trying to add value, trying to bring our own level of insight from an analog world, and I mean, I'll tell you one last thing and I'll shut up. One of the great things about my trip out to Colorado was every day that I had on the weekends, we did something. We went to a park, we went to the Denver Museum, we went to the zoo. Can't remember what else. And every area has like play. There was play and a very different kind of stimulation. And the running joke is, if I lived in Denver, I probably never would have gone to any of those places, but visiting. Right. And so how you bring those insights or build those bridges, to me, is a fascinating topic. And I think, Meg, it's quite a lot about what you were talking about, or at least it's a Venn diagram-ish overlap with, like I said, it's a really big topic, so I don't know quite how to narrow it down.
yeah, I like what you're thinking is there, Terry.
I do too.
Yeah. Do you want to, you're communicate with Jerry and Barb? You could maybe give me an idea about whether it would make any sense to kind of give some feedback to them and say, what our next meeting is going to be, or somehow circle them in, which is kind of a separate issue, but it would bring some more people in the discussion.
Oh yeah, I would definitely do that. I know they'll be jazzed about it. I know they will. I mean, no, Jerry, no, interesting. He's gonna be a grandparent. So this is gonna become, I think, I don't know, I think his daughter is due this autumn, maybe? So this is gonna become really real for him, really relevant, I should say.
Right. And Barb, she doesn't have any grandchildren. I don't
Barb
think.
doesn't have any grandchildren yet.
Yeah.
But Mark, I mean, again, there's a whole bunch of guys I can reach that were at that forum that I can reach out to. And
Well, I would say that I'd rather be a little bit more square on kind of where we would go with the next meeting. I don't know if we want to, well, certainly I think Hillary's talk I recorded, and it's very important. It's important enough to share with anybody who wants to see it, because I thought it was really, really helpful. So that was great. So maybe what we could do is, last time I sent out a doodle poll for a date. So maybe we could figure out a date that would be suitable for everybody at 2 months in the future. And then I guess we would have to figure out if we want to invite somebody or just have a talk like what you just brought up and what Meg was talking about. So maybe there's some sort of interesting thing that we could read together, even if it's a short passage or an article.
And I like the idea of you reaching out to the Notre Dame newsletter people, because that at least manifests some level of interest to begin with, from them.
Well, I was talking about the people that, signed up for my newsletter,
Correct.
like 13, 20 people. Right. Okay. No, I have no hesitancy to say that to them and to share the video with them to get them excited as maybe they'd like to join our discussion. So okay, well, Meg, do you have any thoughts about we should be more firm in what we're going to do?
Well, and I think I do think if we're going to reach out to a broader group, I think we want to stay focused on like the grandparent piece of things, because I think this can just go off in so many different directions. So I really like the idea of focusing next time on kind of our role as grandparents and how we can, as Terry was saying, how do we add value? How do we not overstep? I always, Jenny, you laughed a little when he said not overstep, and I don't know if it was at that, but I mean, my thought is always, I know my parents never thought twice about overstepping.
Exactly. No.
But we do. And
well, you hear about it quickly, don't you? When you
yes, you do. But but it was always just like, it was well-intentioned, and here you go. And I'm putting it out there. But I love the idea of just really digging into kind of our role as grandparents and how we add value on this really challenging situation that our kids are facing, raising their kids in this world.
Yeah. Jenny, what you've done, and I think personally for me with our daughter, is you've provided so much academic substance to what's happening so it's not just mom and dad stay in your lane. It's
Right.
like, hey, are you familiar with this research that people have done about the effects of screens on children as young as 3, and that's got a whole lot of credibility to it that to me feels like it offers a really nice non-threatening bridge to say, just think you should know about this, want to share this with you.
Well, I certainly could make a little presentation to our group about different age levels of age group of people, babies to 0 to 3, and then older, and et cetera, all the way up through high school and even college, about the effects of people's interaction with technology, and especially on children and their growing minds. So that could be something that could be just sort of a jumping off point for our next meeting. I suppose. And then we could talk about what you both talked about, which is adding value. And Meg, I don't know if we should invite our kids just to sit in on it, or maybe wait till like the third meeting to have a young parent join us, something like that. Should we wait? I'll wait.
Let's wait and see how our group solidifies, because we don't know yet what it's going to look like next time if we get some other people and
Okay.
some
Yeah.
that would be my own thinking, because it's tough. Boy, I thought we had it tough raising kids, and
They
but
have so much to juggle and actually to stay in touch with, keep their finger on the pulse of all these different things.
well, all these different things, and they are working in a world that is encroaching into their lives because of technology. So even if they're trying to like disconnect and unplug, there are so many professions where there's an expectation that you have some kind of a device within certain proximity to you. And it's like, yeah. How do you juggle it all? So
And you know what? I think that we have a role to play in terms of being guides on that sort of thing. I know in past Thanksgiving, I'd had a gadget basket where people have to throw their things and throw their devices into the basket. Your family has to be okay with something like that, but you can provide some of your own guidance when they're in your house. That's not too draconian. Because if nobody, especially if you find out about these issues that can affect, like Hillary just went into, Terry, all this business about, how much sewage a connected device can bring into the home and into a child's mind. That stuff cannot be unseen and can terrify and live for years, for a lifetime in the minds of these kids. And that's the problem with porn. So I suppose I could even bring porn into it too. The statistics on that, which is are very sad. And so this mesh, I didn't even know. We got bad internet in the house, and we have a mesh. We got mesh, but I'm going to pin them down and ask them what kind of capabilities we have with the mesh system for later. So go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt. You're going to tell me to sign off after I say this, but another topic for another time that Meg made me spark to is just mental health. Again, I'm gonna have a hard time refining this to a specific topic, but one of the overarching themes is our children grew up in a very different world than we all did. And one likes to think that everything has evolved in a positive way. You could argue with technology, there's come all these unintended consequences. But, mental health just wasn't one of them. We thought a whole hell of a lot about when we were growing up, right? And yet, not only do you worry about your grandchildren, but Meg, the pressures that our children are.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I don't know if this is a hard fact or not, but I think I saw somewhere where someone said that generation, almost every generation has done better than the last. That's not a sure thing for this generation versus ours. But the pressures to do so probably are there. And so wrapping this around with technology and what have you, again, I don't know where I'm going with this, but this topic of strategies to help, maybe in a grandparent's context of how do you alleviate some stress? How do you help provide forums for being able to talk to your children?
Yeah.
Love that.
Suicidal rates, are just, there was a classmate, I don't know if you knew Tom Philbin, Jenny. He was a Dillon guy. I did not know him real well. Our age, committed suicide, I think in April or May.
Oh.
And was successful. I think he was successful I can't remember, it was up in Minneapolis. But you're like, people carry all this baggage, and we're doing a better job as a society. It feels like bringing the topic up. I don't know if we're doing as much yet in trying to participate in doing something about it. And again, it feels like maybe it's a group call farther down the line, but as we, wind our way through what we want this group to do and be, at some point, I think, again, Meg, you kind of brought up that that's a theme that bears a topic, bears a conversation.
I think sooner rather than later. I'm not
Yeah.
sure we should jump into it right next time. However, it could be brought into the short update about where every generation is, because this one has a new name, the anxious generation. It's all about mental health.
Right.
And so it's very, very topical. I will disclose that my family had a very close call in the last couple of months because inadvertently my brother-in-law threw some political question out on this text chain. And then we almost, went to blows over text. And it really tore up the family quite a bit. And so we had to go around and around and finally sit down and hash it out. And anyway, we're in a more peaceful place. It's going to get worse and worse before November. And so it's really important about how to communicate, and it has a lot to do with mental health. And I'm just writing something for worldwide consumption, possibly, for helping moms have a village. A lot of the suicides and murders that happen is when new moms feel alone. And that's when a lot of addiction happens to technology for their babies too, because the moms just pass over the cocoa melon. And so we have to be the village in a really positive way and not be judgmental. And that's why this communicating thing is, because I can, everybody can sort of come off as, the expert judgmental type person, and that's not helpful. And so I hear you, Terry. I think your sentiments are more serious than mine. They're more, I don't know, elemental.
No, I think
Well-
that the grandparent role is also, the parenting role. I mean, being able to communicate with our kids about how do we help? Like, how do we help you? And we're obviously involved in our grandchildren's lives for positive reasons and to help and support our kids. But I think the more that our conversation and discussion also speaks to the reality of the world that our kids are living in, the more effectively we're going to be able to communicate to them about all being on the same page in terms of, these grandbabies.
I mean, I think the word I was groping for was empathy. You read all the time how one of the problems in our country right now is a decided loss of empathy.
Yeah.
Of depending what side on any issue you tee up, it's become very zero-sum game, right? I win or you win, but the other one has to lose. And one of the things that we're talking about in this forum is, this context is, we grew up very different than our kids, even as we watched how they grew up. And then how do you help them? How do you understand what they're going through?
Yep.
Yeah.
Their own challenges.
Good. All right.
I
Well,
love that topic.
yep. And I love how this is developed and how we meshed and melded here. So I guess we have some parameters. I get together in a couple months, and I'll hear back from you, Terry. I'm not sure how germane it's going to be for you to talk to those folks, but
Yeah, I agree.
let me know. But I definitely do want to, I do at least want to communicate with those folks that came to the panel and put their names on the sheet.
Yeah, and for me, for Jerry and Barb, I just know because of their involvement in the panel. I mean, the panel was Barb's idea. I'd like to know that, them to know that there's been traction out of it.
There's been traction, and I would, of course, I would love them to join. In my mind, we want to get back to Jerry Castellini and be
Well,
like,
I will let him know.
don't feel so, he was sort of desperate. He was really grasping for some solutions. And so it may be that I definitely should share back Hillary's talk, I think. What do you think?
Agreed.
Okay.
Yeah, agree.
Okay.
Thank
Great.
you, Jen.
All righty, guys.
Yeah. Wonderful. So yeah, hang in there, and you can always write to me if something comes, into your mind, and or something important to read, and we can share with the group. And then I'll be getting back in touch pretty soon.